Hi, Martina. Thank you so
Hi.
much for doing this. And you have
No worries.
led such a fascinating life. It is so interesting. So I just want to dive right into it right now. And let's start at the beginning, how you actually
Uh-oh.
started playing tennis as a youngster.
Well, I started with my grandmother's racket, wooden racket with wooden handles, and I could only hold it with two hands. So I just hit two-handed backhands against the wall for 2 years because my dad said, until you can hit a forehand, you can't get on the real court, which was right next to the wall. So I just was on the wall for 2 years, and I finally could get my hand around the racket. In fact, hang on. I just happened to have this picture here. Somebody, I don't know where it came from, but my dad took this photo, and this is the earliest photo of me playing tennis. And can you
Oh,
see? And you see
yes.
how I'm holding the racket?
Oh,
My fingers are nowhere near touching because it was such a big handle. So
yeah.
this is the first photo that I have ever of me playing tennis. And then my dad cut the handle so when my sister, who is 6 years younger, she could hold the racket and she had a mini racket. But I had played this with this big ass racket, and all I could do was hit two-handed backhands against the wall. So then when I was 7, I finally went on the court with my dad, and then he started trying to teach me, but he realized he didn't really know how to teach playing tennis, although he was a good club player. So then he asked a famous Czech coach, George Parma, if he would try. I did a tryout with him, and I passed the test. And then once a week, I would get an hour lesson from George, summer and winter, once a week. And in fact, in the winter, that was the only hour I played because there were only 3 indoor courts in the whole Prague, in all of Prague. And so for 3 years, he was coaching me. And then my dad learned how to teach tennis. So then my dad, after George Parma left the country in '68, my dad became my full-time coach.
But it's interesting. I used a big
So,
racket. They didn't have kids' rackets like they do nowadays. I
right,
used the same thing, and that's why I developed a two-handed backhand because the racket kept
right.
falling out of my hand. But you used it for 2 years. How come you never stuck with the two-handed backhand?
Because nobody had it back then. And my coach, he could see that I wanted to come to the net, and I
Yeah.
needed a slice backhand for that and one-handed volley. So and big reach. So he thought it would be much more proper and practical for my style to have a one-handed backhand. So he switched me to a one-hander, and he only had slice, and my dad only had slice backhand. So
Okay.
then I only had a slice backhand until Rene Richards helped me in my 20s to develop a topspin backhand. So that's what happened. But I went from a weapon of a backhand to a weak backhand to then I developed the weapon on the forehand side. But yeah, I wish I had stuck with it and played like Mats Wielander, two-handed
Yeah.
drive,
Yeah.
one-handed slice.
You've done pretty well with a one-handed. But do you mean that at age like 7, 8, or 9, you knew what kind of style you were going to play, and you wanted to get to the net at that young of an age?
I just loved hitting volleys. Maybe it comes from the wall because I hit a lot of volleys against the wall. And I love playing quick volleys, volley to volley, service line to
Wow.
service line. Always loved being at the net. My dad was always having to push me and said, go back, we'll hit some ground strokes. So I did ground strokes, but all I wanted to do was come forward, always.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, when you were a junior, did you have any role models that you looked up to? Did you ever see tennis on TV like the majors? Oh, wait, did you have a TV?
We had a TV. We got a TV when I was about 10, 9. Well, maybe. But wait, I was watching Wimbledon. I was about 8 or 9, so it had to be then. But I remember taking the TV set on a wheelbarrow from the electric store in our hometown, which was a small town outside Prague. And you know the town, you've been there. So
Yeah.
we wheeled it down the hill to our house, and we only had one channel. All of the country had one channel. And we watched Wimbledon, but the screen was so small, black and white, that you really couldn't
Yeah.
see the sport other than the players. You could see the players, but you couldn't see the ball. You just knew where the ball was
Exactly.
because that's where the player was, right?
Do you
But
remember? Do you remember who you watched? Do you remember?
I remember Billie Jean King, Nancy Ritchie, and Margaret Court. And I
Right.
remember, and then I watched live tennis. I saw Rod Laver when I was about 8 or 9 in Prague. They came 2 years in a row. The pros came to Prague, and I watched both years. And so I watched Rod Laver, who was a hero, and and I loved the way he played. So I'm like, okay, that's exactly how I want to play the game. But most guys back then were serve volleyers, but he was a lefty on top of that, so I instantly related to him.
Well, on the other side of the world, I was watching also, and Margaret Court played Nancy Ritchie. And I remember, I think it was the same year, must have been, but I remember thinking, oh my God, that seems so far-fetched at my age that I would even be playing Wimbledon. But
in fact, I have a funny story about that. Remember Nancy Ritchie always played in a hat? My mom went into her closet and dug out her hat that she wore on her wedding. And she was parading around in that hat because Nancy Ritchie played in a hat.
But as a junior, when did you first realize that, hey, I'm really good?
Well, it really wasn't until I won the Czech championships, 14 and under. When I was 14, I finally beat this girl that kept beating me 12 and under, and then 14 and under when we were 13. Finally, at 14, I won the Czech championships, beating her in the finals, like easily, like 6-2, 6-3. Just that year, I got much better. And then the following year, I won the Czech senior championships before I won the junior championships. I was 15, but I won the senior championships. That week, I just started playing a much higher level tennis. I don't know what happened. I was by myself. And I just came of age that tournament and won the whole thing. And that allowed me then the following year, 73, to come to the States and compete on the USLTA tour, where I first laid eyes on you.
Well, that's where I'm going with that. Okay, so we played each other in Akron, Ohio in 1973. Yep. And I won the match, but a tough 2 sets. And my take on you was, you were talented, you were powerful, and you were emotional. And those are the 3 words that I would use to describe you. What did you think of me?
You never missed. And and my best serve, which was the slice serve, went to your best shot, your backhand. But my goal for that match was for you to remember my name. Yeah. So I had no ideas that I would beat you, but I just wanted to get close and make you remember my name. And so I did both. I think it was 6-3, 7-6.
Yes.
It was actually a 5-4 tie break, so I held my own, and I thought, okay, if I did this well the first time I played, then I think I can one day get better and win. But the same thing happened. I played Ivan Gulagon the week before in Hingham, Massachusetts, and I lost to her 3-4. Never broke serve, but lost my serve once he said. I thought, okay, I'm close enough, So it was a great test for where I stood as a tennis player.
You're still a teenager. Yeah. You're right in the mix.
Yeah.
So we played each other 79 more times after that. Okay.
Little did we know.
To many, it is considered the greatest rivalry ever in tennis.
It is.
Briefly, what do you think it meant to women's tennis to have a rivalry like that?
Well, and I think it brought in, it went outside of tennis. It went outside of sport because it just kept growing so much that people that were not even interested in tennis would come and watch our matches because we were number 1, number 2 in the world, playing the best tennis of anybody against each other. And I think we were also good role models. There was never any emotional drama. We just, let's see who is better on the day. So I think we just transcended the sport and transcended sport itself, where people that were not even to sports would know about us or would watch and maybe start. And I'm getting so many now that they're replaying our matches. I'm getting so many tweets from people saying, I started playing tennis after watching your match against Chrissy. And, you don't know how many people you impact by what you do or by what you say. And it's just amazing to see how many people came into the fold of tennis because of our rivalry. So that's a plus that we weren't thinking about when we were playing, that's for sure. But it's funny because people didn't get to know us that much. No. It's only what you saw on the court, and any interview, any written press was always written by somebody else. So there was no direct connection really to the people. Very few people could watch us live. So what they saw on TV, again through different cameras, what they chose to show. I remember playing a great match, and I was going like this to my opponent and saying, this ball was this far out, just to let him know that the ball was out. And then the next day, the caption under says Navratilova complaining about a line call. That's not what happened. So we were at the mercy of the media. And nowadays, the players have so much a better opportunity to connect directly with the fans. And I wish we had that. We didn't. So, they see what they saw, and they made their judgment based on other people's preconceptions of who we were.
Yeah, well, we certainly pushed each other to higher levels, and you really helped me to improve in many areas. And, I'm glad that you came along, because I finished my career playing the best I could because of you. So thank you. And I think we brought our own set of fans into the mix, and that's when you said it transcended tennis. But okay, enough about me.
No, we pushed each other. You were the carrot for me, because you were number one. I needed to beat you to get to number one. And then when I got to number one, then I was the carrot for you. So as we said before, we made each other into better tennis players. Yeah. So, I don't know where I would have been had you not been there, and vice versa. We would have won more, but I don't think we would have been as good a tennis player.
Maybe been bored with the competition. But anyway, you continuing your journey, you then defected to the U.S. in 75. And I've read that, to further your tennis, if you thought that you wanted to become number one, you wanted to win a major, and you thought that was the only way to achieve that goal, it certainly was life-changing for you. And talk us through that move.
Well, I remember talking to you in the locker room at Forest Hills that I was going to do this. And I think you said, "Are you sure?" And I was sure. I've been waiting. You beat me in the semifinals, and I knew, I don't know if it was before the match that I talked to you, like the day before or after, but I waited till I was out of the tournament when you beat me in the semis, and then I went straight to the Immigration and Naturalization Office in Manhattan. It was a one-way ticket. That's the tough part about it. I could not go back without repercussions, which meant 2 years in prison, actually, if I did go back, and never would get out of the country again. Or I don't go back, which means I don't see my family and my sister, because they could not get out of the country, which is exactly why I left, because to get out of the country, you had to have permission of the government. The passport didn't mean anything. So I knew I had to make that choice. It was either my tennis and my sanity, or living in under a communist regime that dictated when and where I could play. So that was the tough part. And people say, "Oh, it was so brave for you to come out. It was so brave for you to speak out," and this and that. I'm like, the brave thing was leaving my country. After that, everything was piece of cake. Because as it turned out, I didn't see my mother for 4 years. I didn't see my father and my sister for 5 years. After that, I saw my grandmother once when she actually was allowed to come to the States. And so that was the tough part. And people say, "Do you have regrets?" I regret two things. I regret that I didn't get a coach when I defected, because my father was my coach, and I was for 6 years without a coach until Rene Richards started working with me in 81. And I regret that I had to defect, but I don't regret actual defection. I just regret that I was forced into doing that.
I probably asked you that because I was thinking of your family. You had such a great family. I loved your mom. Your mom was such a great tennis parent, and your sister and your dad. And I was like, whoa, are you sure you want to do that? But, you had ambitions. And at the end of the day, it worked out great, because you were reunited with them, but you just had to be patient about it. Then you had a pretty good life with them.
It was a selfish or self-oriented thing to do. At the same time, I knew there would be some repercussions in then Czechoslovakia, now Czech Republic, but not life-changing repercussions for them. Had I been brought up in the Soviet Union, I wouldn't have done it, because I know my family would have suffered so much. But in Czechoslovakia, when people left the country, the repercussions were pretty minor compared to Soviet Union. So my sister couldn't get into this college that she wanted to get into, but which was art school, but ended up going to dental school, which my parents were happier about anyway. She had a more certain job and a certain future. And my parents were demoted for like a year and then allowed back into their job like a year later. So it wasn't horrible. And I was able to provide for them, of course, and then buy them a house, etc. Later on. But it wasn't easy, definitely. I knew there would be some repercussions, but it wasn't wasn't going to be horrible. So I just made that choice.
Well, you certainly grew up very quickly, but I think one of the nice things about it was I think all the women tennis pros wanted to take care of you, and they surrounded themselves with you and really cared about you, and you were sort of in the sisterhood of being with all of us. So
yeah, you're right. And the tour was my family. When I would go, I lived in Los Angeles at the beginning with Fred Barman and his wife, who was the father of a player on the tour, Sherry Barman. It was my manager. Then I lived in Texas, in Dallas with Sandra Haney, who then I was in a relationship with her for 3 years. But really, my home was on the road with you guys, with you and Betty Stova and Billie Jean and Rosie. Right. And Frankie and all the women that we played all the tournaments. It wasn't like you played 2 and you skipped 1. We played all the tournaments that were there, pretty much. Like out of 9, we would play 8 in a row. And that was my family. And you're right, the older players, which everybody was older pretty much than me at the time, really embraced me and took good care of me.
Well, in 1986. We're getting to another profound moment in your life. And I have to say, I was a part of it too. It was a profound moment in my life. You went over to play Fed Cup as an American citizen, and you went over to Prague, where you had defected. And that was awfully brave of you.
I'm glad that we were able to share it, and I love being on Fed Cup teams with you, because we always played against each other, so it was nice to be on the same team. And we had already played a few before this, but coming to Prague obviously was special. It was the first time that I was coming back since I defected, so 11 years had passed. The federation had to allow me in, because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to have the Fed Cup, so I had to agree that whoever was on the team would be allowed to come in. Otherwise they were never going to let me in, or they weren't going to let me out. So I did not feel threatened or anything, but it certainly was odd coming there. And then, first time I would see my best friends and the rest of my family, my grandmother, my mother's mother, my cousins, and actually I met my half brother for the first time that I didn't know before I defected. And it was just an amazing homecoming. It was a very emotional in a good way and also in a sad way. I saw my grandmother on the way to the airport on the way out. It was the last time I saw her. She passed away about 2 months later because she was sick. And I cried. I actually cried when the plane was taking off, because I could get out of the country, but the people that lived there, 13 million people that lived there, couldn't, unless the government gave them the okay. And I cried for all the people that couldn't get on that airplane, that if they wanted to. And it was just a very bitter, sweet week, not moment, but week, really. But the crowds were fantastic. We had some funny things happening on the court, off the court, with the reporters, the way they reported our interviews and matches. You had a big article in the Czech paper the day after the first match, and me, the representative from the US also won her match.
Yeah, they didn't name you in the news.
They didn't name me.
No.
And before I played my first match on center court, they announced on my right, Rafaela Reggi, and on my left, representative from the United States. And the crowd started booing, and Rafaela said, "What's going on?" She thought they were booing her, and I had to call her to the net. I said, "No, they just want him to say my name, because the umpire was instructed not to say my name." And so people are yelling like they do these days, "Say her name, say her name." So finally he said, on my left, the representative of the United States, Martina Navratilova, and they went nuts. So it made it actually a bigger deal than it would have been had he announced it the first time. So it was just so many different moments, and I was just so happy to share it with you and Pam and Zina Garrison. Marty Reeson was our coach, and we all went to my hometown. You saw the club and where I played on that wall, etc. So that was magic. Yeah, I would love to relive that week again.
Yes. Me too.
Without the sadness. Yeah.
I remember your mom cooking a big dinner. I remember your first match. You were number one on the team, probably number one in the world at that time, and they put you on a side court, and they put me on center court. And on the side court, people were hanging over the fences and screaming and yelling for you. And we've talked about this. There was a train. It was right on the train track, and there's a train that went back and forth, and I was like, whoa, and he's going back and forth, and people are hanging out of the windows because they wanted to get a glimpse of you. But it was like out of a book. It was like out of a book, a history book, and that transcended tennis in the sense that, you know, you could just sense that the crowds cheered for you and admired your courage.
Exactly, it went beyond tennis, but actually, looking back, it was poetic justice that I played my first match on that court, because that was the original center court of that club where all the Davis Cup matches were played. And I used to sit, you know, like the train would be right behind me. I would sit in the first or second row that was reserved for juniors from the federation. And I would sit there, watch Jan Kodesh play. I saw Bjorn Borg play, sitting in those seats on that court. So I was quite happy to play on that court because that court had so much history in it. So
that's great.
They were trying to put me down by putting me on that court, but you know, it didn't matter at all, because I love history. As you know, we feel it when we step on the court, Philippe Chatrier at Roland Garros, or of course center court at Wimbledon. It has so much history in it, so I was quite happy on that court. But it was amazing to see the people hanging from the rafters. Really. But the best part was the train actually stopping.
It was
backing up.
I know. How did they do that? It was like,
classic.
Wait, don't you have somewhere to go? No.
Well, the delays were normal back then, so I think it didn't matter. He was a little late.
I'll tell you what, I saw when you first came on the court at the beginning of the tournament, the government officials just stood there. I mean, they sat in their seats on the balcony and didn't clap. And I promise you, I looked up after the whole thing was over, and they did stand up and they did clap. And I'm thinking, okay, Martina for president. I mean, I was like, you made such a big mark and such a big impression. So that was wonderful. So I'm gonna go right to your records that you've made, and there are many, but I'm just gonna name 3. 59 majors, Grand Slam wins in singles, doubles, and mixed. 332 weeks at number 1 on the WTA ranking, and 9 Wimbledons. I'm sure there are more. But of these records, what are you most proud of?
Well, I think 9 Wimbledons, because that is I don't think it'll be broken. Although Serena looked like she may be breaking it, but I think she's at 7. So she would have to win 2 more to tie me and 3 more to break it. So I don't think that's going to happen. But overall, I think I am just proud of the longevity and the consistency, which to me now is overlooked because it's all about the majors. Yeah. But when we played, it was about that. Who was number 1? You know, who won? Every tournament counted the same. Wimbledon, the US Open were a step above winning championships, and then the rest of the tour, they were all like huge. Whether it was Amelia Island or Detroit or Rome, we treated them the same, and very important. It wasn't like a warm up for Wimbledon. It was a tournament. So the consistency, I think I'm proud of, and the one record that I know will never be broken, which was winning singles and doubles in the same event 80 times. So that's not going to happen.
I knew I didn't have all my facts.
That one is you know, because most players don't play singles and doubles in the same tournament, and most players play either singles or doubles. They're much more specialized. In our time, a lot more of the top players played doubles. But now it's just become really specialized and whatever. So I know that one's not going to be broken ever. So I'm proud of that one, maybe the most. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to name, you had some prolific coaches and trainers when you were playing. And just give me a sentence or 2 for each of them. You had Billie Jean King. You had Mike Estep. You had Renee Richards. You had Nancy Lieberman. I mean, let's pick those 4. Tell me what they did for your game.
Well, Nancy Lieberman got me going. She made me motivated and made me realize that I could be working harder than I was. I could get in better physical shape and get a coach and, you know, kind of cover all the bases. And so I started training really hard that summer of 81. And then during the US Open, I got to the finals, but I didn't have a coach. And Renee Richards just started helping me during the tournament as a hitting partner because I was so disorganized. I didn't have anybody to hit with. I'm like, oh, Renee, can we hit? And we hit, and there it was. I said, oh, this woman, she's so knowledgeable. I knew that, but it occurred to me to get a coach. So that was a big thing. And Renee really made me realize how to construct points better, really about strategy, and most of all helped me with my technique. Mike Estep, he kind of let me loose. He said, forget strategies, go to the net, play the way you want to play. Don't worry about anything.
Right.
And then Billie Jean King kind of re-engineered my game because my footwork was the cross step, and we needed to change that because now everything was open stance. The game was moving to a faster pace. The cross step wasn't working, so I had to re-engineer that. And just really made me take a good look at myself, not just from the physical standpoint, but from emotional and mental, and balanced me out as a tennis player and as a person.
You've never been afraid of using your platform. And as long as I've known you, you have always stood up for the injustices in the world. That's what I've loved about you. Can you name one or two that are really closest to your heart?
Well, obviously the LGBT, gay and lesbian movement, which I came out in '81 when it really was not a good idea to do so. And I've lost a lot of endorsements because of it. Lost a lot of fans because of it. Some, fans were even like booing when I walked on the court, and it had nothing to do with my tennis. So that was disappointing. But overall, it was a very freeing thing to do, and I knew I couldn't be pretending to be anything else. But I think looking back, I didn't realize what an impact it had on other people's lives in a good way. So I'm very proud of that, being able to help others without ever having met them.
That's dear to your heart for sure. Looking forward ahead, 10 years from now, when you look at the WTA and you look at women's tennis, what are your hopes and dreams for them? What do you want to see at that point?
Pretty much going the same direction in which we've been going, which is more international. The visibility, I think, has been great. Of course, now we're living in a different time, but 10 years from now, I am seeing, obviously Coco Gauff having won a few slams by now.
For sure.
But what I really love about our players, Naomi Osaka, Coco, have been very active on the social issues side, and we've been at the forefront of that over the years. You fighting for women's equality, me fighting for gay and lesbian equality and women's rights, etc. It's just nice to see our players so well-rounded as human beings. As much tennis as they play, they still have time to look around and see their place in the world on a bigger scale. So I hope that women's tennis goes that direction, and we make more good impact on girls growing up where they want to be tennis players, where they want to be athletes, where they want to achieve, where they want to, do more. So just to keep inspiring girls to do more, and not have to be pioneers, which they still would be in many countries. But that's where the international expansion is helping so much, where we have so many players from different countries making a difference for young girls in those countries. Maybe not so much in America or Europe, but other parts of the world. So I love that expansion, that reach of athletes and of women tennis players. We are the preeminent sport for women. And I think we've really set good examples. We have really great role models. And I think it'll keep continuing because they have the weight of history behind them, and they're going to want to do us proud, and they are doing us proud. My God, we have so many great champions out there. It's great to see. So 10 years from now, I hope we're still here talking about them, and I look forward to that.
Yeah, I think that this generation is just much more fearless than we were, and I think that they're not afraid to voice their opinion, and they are saying what we were thinking but we're afraid to say, and that's going to get good marks, for them.
Yeah, or we didn't have the opportunity to say it because we were really only answering questions about our match. We didn't have that platform to directly connect with our fans without being censored, without being edited out. So I think that's such a great opportunity, and the players today are using it really well. So I'm so thrilled that they're doing that, and we would have been doing that too had there been Twitter 30 years ago.
No, that's for sure. But I think that you have to grow up with parents that are encouraging you to be fearless and encouraging you to do whatever you want to do in life. And I don't feel like our generation, our parents' generation, felt that way. I think there's a lot of fear going around the 50s and 60s for obvious reasons, and that's why I like this generation. But anyway, I guess, okay, so I've come to the last question, which is this beautiful trophy. But I guess I want to ask you, this is the year-end number one, what it means to you to end the year WTA number one player.
Ending as number one was huge. I remember the day after I won the Wimbledon title, I was so thrilled I won Wimbledon. I also became number one in the rankings, and it was great, but still the thrill of winning Wimbledon was bigger at the time. But to finish number one at the end of the year, for me, was huge. Later on, who is number one during the year didn't really matter. It just meant you're number one, the top of the draw, bottom of the draw, but it's kind of irrelevant. But when you got the number one ranking at the end of the year, it was massive. So I was always thrilled to whenever the new year came around, I'm like, he's to Wimbledon and the US Open and to finishing number one. That was my toast. That was the goal.
Yeah.
So thrilled that I was, good enough and lucky enough to have gotten there.
Well, and also it shows that you supported the tournaments. You supported the tour.
Yep.
It wasn't, I'll play 6 months and then, I'll see how I feel. You supported it. We were playing 21, 23 tournaments easily. So it was it was a great time. It was a great time. And I thank you. I've taken up enough of your time. I thank you. You are
Chrissy, anytime.
A great champion.
Time flies.
And
this is the quickest hour of my life, I think.
I know, but I just want you to know I've learned a lot from you. I've learned a lot from you. You've been a teacher to me. Your fearlessness and your courage, and you're a great friend, and I appreciate it.
I learned to control my emotions better because I had a great example across the net. And and the friendship means the world. So,
Thank you, Martina.